We went from investing 250 million in Bitcoin to 425 million in Bitcoin to eventually a billion in Bitcoin to 2 billion in Bitcoin to just slightly less than 4 billion.
You said there are decades when nothing happens and there are weeks when Bitcoin happens.
So every decade there's some profound paradigm shift. It's such an out of the blue idea that no one can conceive of why you would even want it. What you've got is a lot of people questioning all their premises, and rising through that chaos is a new idea. What if I can encrypt energy? What if I can encrypt money such that nobody on earth, no government can debase it, no corporation can steal it? I don't trust anybody. I'm going to create a shared immutable ledger, incorruptible, immortal, transcendental ledger. If I can transfer $1 million of value from me to you without an intermediary, that means I have transcended the political realm.
You said, Brian, I like Bitcoin because it has low aspirations.
The idea of Bitcoin was, how do I create a protocol that's fair and equitable that I give as a gift to the world that no one can control? If you're going to do it and you understand thermodynamics, and if you have any sense of genetics or biology or physics, you realize you need to be very humble in your aspirations. You know, that phrase, there are decades when nothing happens and, weeks when decades happen. It really refers to paradigm shifts. And if you think about the paradigm shift when automobiles arrived, there's the famous snapshot in New York City where, there's just a bunch of horse and buggies, and 10 years later, it's all cars. And in that 10 years, you adopted it. And I remember, standing once on the Pantheon and, or on the Acropolis, and I'm like taking a photo and about to post it. And I think to myself, what's different about this? And I think, well, last time I was here, maybe a decade ago, I had no smartphone, I had no iPhone, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, you couldn't post it. There were no, digital photography didn't exist. So a decade goes by and you're like, you're trying to remember, you remember back in college, I went to college, we didn't have laptops,
Yeah.
So when I was in college, there were no laptops, and I thought, well, what if I'd had a spreadsheet when I was doing engineering? I went with an HP 15C calculator, and we had notebooks, and we wrote down 20 pages of calculations in a notebook with the calculator, and I remember seeing people saying, well, you got a calculator? We use slide rules, and you fast forward a decade and people have laptops. You fast forward another decade, they have internet. You fast forward another decade, they've got YouTube and simulations, and now you're starting to question whether or not you even needed to go to college at all. Maybe you could have just sat at home. So every decade, there's some profound paradigm shift. And the thing that hits you about a paradigm shift is it's such an out of the blue idea that no one can conceive of why you would even want it. So, it took a while before people thought maybe radio waves have a place, right? Or maybe electricity has a place in the world, and why would I want a railroad? But I think now we're starting this paradigm shift of digital energy. And why would I want to move a block of $1 billion of something from point A to point B through cyberspace in a split second with instant final settlement, right? Initially, if you roll the clock back a decade, we didn't have it. Every financial crisis we've had, right, in the history of the world, and we've had 10,000 of them. There have been 10,000 currency collapses, from the Lydians to the Athenians to the Spartans to the Romans to the Venetians, to the Brits multiple times, to the Carthaginians. You could just go on, and the Persians, and go on and on and on and on. And the history is full of examples of an empire rises, someone mints a currency, the successors or the children of the conqueror debase the currency, the grandchildren debase it more, the great-grandchildren forget how they actually got the power, they spend everything, go wacky crazy, pretty soon the economy collapses. You can't pay your soldiers. They all defect. And the barbarians come over the gate and they take everything, including your debased gold. They melt it down, they purify it, they mint their own coin, and the cycle starts again. That's literally taken place 10,000 times. You know, when von Schliemann dug up ancient Troy, he dug up like 19 ancient Troys. He found 19 cities buried under each city. Everybody said, good place to build a city. They would build it. They would rise over a couple hundred years. They would crash and burn. 200 years would go by. Someone else comes along and says, wow, good place to build a city. We do it again. We do it again. We do it again. That's the history of money. And that's the history of economics. Along comes Satoshi, and we've got the white paper, and, January 3rd, 2009, we launched this little monetary virus or this idea virus, and it kind of burns very, very low level for a while, and people aren't sure of it. It's a gimmicky thing, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're waiting for, well, why would you need it? And you had to be a visionary to kind of need it or get it. If you lived in Argentina and your currency collapsed, and you remember the currency collapsing, or if you lived in North Korea, or if you lived in Africa and your currency collapsed and you watched your family get wiped out, then maybe you get it, but that wasn't the mainstream, right? The Western world is not run by people that lost their family's life savings in Africa or South America. So it was an interesting idea, but it was a fringe idea until 2020. And in 2020, the monetary inflation rate tripled in the US. And what we saw was, in the world's best economies, you're losing 15 to 20% of your economic value in the currency every year. In the second tier economies, you're losing 30% or more. Like the Japanese yen is down 24% against the dollar in the last 12 months, right? And in the tertiary economies, you're losing 50, 60, 70% of the value in the currency. And that's where you get a Sri Lanka, where literally the entire government collapses, or what you're seeing going on in Africa and Zimbabwe right now, or famously in Lebanon, where people have been breaking into banks, taking people hostage to get their own money back, right? The bank robbers are robbing banks, and their demand is, give me my own money back, because the government stole the money and the banks froze it, devalued it, and they're going to give it back to you over the next 17 years, devaluing it 20% a year while they trickle it out to you. So here we are. We're in this great reset, if you will. People are questioning currency. They're questioning their political thoughts. They're questioning stores of value. And every conventional model, the 60-40 bond model, it's broken. Bonds, for example, are down 20% in the same year where stocks are down 20%. Okay, so that never happened for 20 years. So why does that happen? Because when you drive interest rates to zero, if you can't drive interest rates negative, then there's no way to get bonds to go up. So what we've got is the 60-40 models are broken. Conventional ideas like, oh, I'm just going to store my value by buying property, that's kind of broken in a lot of places. People are losing faith in just investing in property when you see the gyrations of this property. The conventional idea, I'm going to buy S&P index stocks. Well, the S&P is slightly up. NASDAQ is flat over the last 2 years. It blasted up and then it blasted down. So what you've got is a lot of people questioning all their premises, and rising through that chaos is a new idea. And the new idea is, what if I can encrypt energy? What if I can encrypt money such that nobody on earth, no government can debase it, no corporation can steal it? I don't trust anybody. People don't trust governments, right? We're at an all-time low in public trust of institutions. It doesn't matter what government. And they don't trust companies. And why? For good reason, because companies are influenced by governments, right? Right? if you're in America, you're certainly not going to trust a company in China. And if you're in China, you're certainly not going to trust a company in America.